everybody, it's Steve Johnson of eCoronado.com, and we're going to talk with Bruce Johnson today. There's no relation. Bruce is a very good guy, and I'd like to say that I'm related to him, but I'm not. And we're going to talk about Coronado's history, the past, get some really good stories because he is a lifelong Coronado resident. And with that, we're going to start talking to Bruce with our first series of questions. So everybody, here's Bruce Johnson. Where were you born? Were you actually born on Coronado Island? If so, where were you born?
Well, I tell everybody that I was born on Coronado, in Coronado, but if truth be told, I was actually born on Runway 2 on North Island, which was a temporary Navy hospital, at least the year that I was born, 1948, and then subsequently torn down. Okay. So it's not there any longer. So I'm a Coronadan who was born on North Island.
Now, what's your family background? How were you able to be born on North Island? Was your family part of the military, or tell us just a little bit about that? You know, the beginnings of the Johnson clan coming to Coronado.
My father was a fighter pilot, so he was stationed at North Island, as well as Miramar, a lot of other places like that. So part of the family history goes way back, actually into the 1800s. And the other half, starts about in the early 40s. So a combination of two family histories, really. Okay. But the history goes way back all the way to the very beginning.
Wow. So I'm guessing this is 40s, 50s. What time frame are we looking at for the early years of Bruce Johnson here in Coronado?
Well, I do proudly say that I have been to every single 4th of July parade except for one. In 1974, my father was in the hospital with appendicitis. My sister was getting married, so I had to stand in for him. But other than that, that's the only 4th of July parade I have ever missed in my whole life. So from 1948, I was here. Earliest memories, of course, early mid-50s.
Well, what was life like in Coronado in the 1950s? Your early years as a youth here in Coronado. And I'm curious to know about places that you hung out. Obviously, there wasn't a bridge yet. There weren't the Ks yet. The shores weren't here. Maybe didn't have as many people here either. But what was life like in the village or in the city of Coronado during the 50s?
I think it would be impossible to overstate how different it actually was. And it's enjoyable for me to tell people that weren't here before the bridge, who really appreciate what a wonderful place it is now, that it was such an incredibly different place before. For example, growing up, prior to 1969, there wasn't one stoplight in the entire town. My memory is going way back into like elementary school. There was really only a handful of stop signs in the town. There weren't even that many stop signs. The population was really about 17,000 in Coronado itself. But it was a totally different atmosphere. Almost every block had vacant lots on them. Mm-hmm. You could cross, even in the summer, you could cross Orange Avenue, believe it or not. You just walked up to Orange Avenue. Usually there might be one car, but they would stop. Right. And you would just cross Orange Avenue. Even the adults could cross Orange Avenue. But as a kid, I remember, I hung around at the Village Theater. That's where all the kids were Saturday.
Wait, the Village Theater was open back then? I've yet to see the Village Theater open. So people actually watch movies there, right?
I grew up in the Village Theater. Okay. That was hanging on Orange Avenue was what we did back then. And that was part of the fun, was going through the outside lobby and looking at all the posters and to see what movies, were coming up, and then talking about what was going to happen on Saturday, because of course we had the serials. Yep. And then a lot of times they would have entertainment actually, on the stage. So in the 50s and 60s in Coronado, the Village Theater was really a central, integral part of growing up, and that's why it holds such a fond place in mine and most of the natives' memories. I was involved in a thing to try to help bring the Village Theater back, and I'm still hopeful that it reopens.
I've heard some good things about it, and hopefully it does reopen very soon. What are some other highlights around town, maybe even places to eat or places to hang out, individual names? We're going to have a lot of people watching this who probably grew up in Coronado too during that same period, where they might remember a certain place or hangout. Any kind of name dropping places you can mention today?
I'm going to have to really search the memory banks, on this one, because I think if you could go back and see pictures of Orange Avenue, like the then versus now, like they have, and I've got a book, the then versus now in California, and it's remarkable how everything has changed. Well, almost everything has changed on Orange Avenue. I mean, it's completely different. People don't know. We had 5 car dealerships
In
Coronado. In Coronado, we had the Coronado department store where we bought all of our clothes. We had to have at least half a dozen grocery stores.
Okay.
It was a completely different place because getting across and going across on the ferry was a pretty big deal. So Coronado was very different back then. It was very self-contained, and we all had our little places. I mean, Bob's Drive-In. Anybody who was here is going to remember.
Right.
Bob's. That was a big deal. Was Bob's Drive-In. Going to Free Brothers Market during the summer was almost a ritual because for a quarter you could go to Free Brothers and get a hot dog, a small Coke, and a candy bar for 25 cents.
Wow.
Yes, that's going way back, but I remember when the Coke went from a dime to 12 cents, we thought it was the end of the world.
Now tell me a little bit. You just mentioned Ferry Landing, and I haven't been here long enough to know about the cars going back and forth over the ferry. But what was Ferry Landing like at that time? Was there a big parking lot that you parked your car at, or were there multiple ferries that you actually loaded your car onto to get to downtown? I have no idea what that used to look like, and what was that experience to get over to San Diego?
That's a good question. That was another integral part of life in Coronado as a kid back in the 50s and 60s was the ferry. As a kid, it cost a dime to be a passenger on the ferry. So you could walk on the ferry. And you would have to walk up a ramp onto this top level of a building that was right to the left of where they loaded the ferries. There was no parking lots really down there because nobody parked much and did anything. I mean, there was dirt lots. It was very rural back then. I mean, you could find, I'll give you an example of how I could go down around the ferry or any of those places where the Little League fields used to be, or still are actually, and find horned toads, lizards, scorpions, any day of the week.
Right.
So it was still very desert. And the area to the left, if you're looking at where the ferry landing is now, the area to the left of there was relatively undeveloped. You can see pictures that all the way back into the 50s, nobody wanted to live on the bay, and it was just all vacant. There was just all vacant lots. That was not considered to be a good place, to be. It was awesome as far as we were concerned because we hung out there, and it was still like you were out in the country, without houses, and very cool. But the cars would go right down Orange Avenue. And so when there was a wait, the cars would literally be backed up Orange Avenue. That was the only time we really had traffic. Right. But they would be backed up Orange Avenue because there was no place else for them to go. So sometimes you would see them backed up to maybe second, or even third. But that was unusual because, we didn't have the kind of traffic that we have now. We didn't have the people that we have now. We didn't have hardly anybody coming up from the South Bay because the South Bay didn't exist like it does today, and of course the main traffic then as now is going to North Island.
Yep.
And almost everybody that went to North Island took the Nickel Snatcher, which was a passenger ferry boat that cost 5 cents.
Right.
So at the end, I mean, it was like 45 cents to take your car, and if you missed the ferry, it'd be 45 minutes. So nobody took the cars back then. They all took the Nickel Snatcher to get to North Island. So we didn't have that North Island traffic issue. Hardly at all. But the area around there, taking the ferry across, I can remember if you could somehow scrounge up a quarter, that was an all-day pass on the ferry. And there was almost always porpoises, and the water was very clear, even though it was polluted in some respects, I know. But I fished every single square inch of, Coronado.